Sarah had hit rock bottom. With a baby on the way, and no savings to speak of, she was desperate for a fresh start. So when she stumbled upon a dilapidated cabin at the edge of town, abandoned and broken, it seemed like the perfect project, something she could fix up on her own. But when she started digging, literally, she uncovered something far more valuable than she could have ever imagined. Something that would change her life forever. What began as a gamble in a desperate moment turned into a discovery that left her speechless. Before we dive into Sarah's story, we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? If you love stories of resilience and unexpected discoveries, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss tomorrow's episode. It's even more unbelievable than this one. Let's get started. Sarah stood at the edge of the overgrown clearing, her boots sinking slightly into the soft earth as she gazed at the cabin in front of her. It had once been beautiful, a proud little building with large windows and a sturdy porch. But now, it was a sad, broken thing, its roof sagging in places and the walls leaning at odd angles. Vines had crept up and over it, masking its crumbling frame. The front door was barely hanging on its hinges, and the windows were shattered or missing altogether. She rubbed her hands over her swollen belly, feeling a flicker of warmth as the baby inside her moved. Her heart ached, and her mind raced, filled with the constant worry of how she would provide for herself and the child. She had no money, no job, and nowhere to go. The town, while quaint, offered no opportunities. But here, this cabin, this broken house could be the answer. When she first heard about it, she hadn't thought much of it. The locals spoke in hushed tones about the abandoned cabin at the edge of town, the one that had been left to rot after its owners had mysteriously vanished. People were afraid of it, calling it a dangerous place, a relic of the past that was better left undisturbed. But Sarah wasn't afraid of the ruin. To her, it was a chance for a fresh start, a chance to rebuild. What did she have to lose? She took a tentative step toward the cabin, feeling her breath catch in her throat. Her fingers brushed against the rough bark of a nearby tree as she approached the door. Inside, the floor had collapsed in places, leaving large gaps that led into what she could only imagine was a crawl space or an underground room. Despite its dilapidated state, the cabin spoke to her, called to her in a way that nothing else had. She could see the potential in it, the life that could return to these forgotten walls with enough care and hard work. She had nothing but time, and she had to try. Kneeling down, she ran her fingers over the exposed floorboards. That's when she noticed something strange. Beneath the debris, there was an indentation in the dirt, like a hidden door. She cleared away the rotting wood and dirt, revealing the faint outline of a doorframe that had been long buried. Her heart raced. What was this? A basement, a hidden room, something forgotten? Without thinking, she stood, grabbed a nearby crowbar, and began prying the boards away from the door. The creak of the wood echoed in the stillness, and the door slowly opened, revealing the darkness below. A chill ran down her spine. There was something down there, something that had been waiting for decades. She didn't know what it was, but she felt it in her bones. This was more than just a ruined house. There was a secret here, one that could change everything. The air grew colder as Sarah stepped closer to the open door, her breath visible in the dim light of the late afternoon. She hesitated for a moment, staring into the darkness that stretched beneath the cabin. The hole in the floor was small, barely wide enough for her to crawl through, but something about it called to her. She felt a strange pull, as if the Renner-Rolaya house itself was urging her to discover what lay beneath. Her heart pounded in her chest as she knelt down, carefully lowering herself into the narrow opening. The ground was uneven, and the sharp edges of broken wood and metal scraped against her skin as she slid into the dark space below. Her hands shook as she tried to steady herself, but the anticipation surged through her veins, driving her forward. Once her feet hit the ground, she paused, taking in the eerie quiet that surrounded her. There was something almost peaceful about it, a stillness that felt unnatural, as though the world had forgotten this space. The dim light from above barely filtered through the gaps in the floor, casting long, shadowy stretches of light across the room. Her eyes adjusted, and she began to take in the space around her. It was much larger than she had expected. The room stretched out before her, lined with shelves filled with old dusty boxes and forgotten items. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. But there was something else, something buried deep beneath all the dust and rot. At the far end of the room, her eyes caught on a faint glint of something metallic. She walked toward it, her boots crunching on the broken floorboards, the sound echoing through the silence. The glimmer grew brighter as she approached, revealing an old, rusted chest partially buried under the floorboards. Her breath caught in her throat. What was this? It looked ancient, the edges of the chest worn and faded, as if it had been untouched for decades. Sarah's pulse quickened as she crouched down, her fingers trembling as she pried at the wooden boards covering it. With a creak, the chest gave way, revealing its contents. Inside, nestled among old papers and tattered fabric, was something she never could have expected. A collection of old jewelry, silver coins, and a faded, leather-bound journal. She reached for the journal first, the weight of it, heavy in her hands as she opened the cracked cover. The pages were yellowed with age, but the writing inside was legible, though the words were in a language she didn't understand. Sarah's heart raced. She had uncovered something more than just forgotten treasure. There was a story hidden here, one that had been left behind, waiting to be found. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she could feel it. This discovery was the key to everything. Sarah sat on the cold stone floor of the hidden room, the journal spread open in front of her. The dim light from above barely illuminated the pages, but she could still make out the faded words. They were written in a language that seemed both foreign and strangely familiar, a mix of symbols she had never seen before, and a few words that seemed to hint at something she almost recognized. Her fingers traced the edges of the pages, the rough texture of the paper a reminder of how long this journal had been hidden away. She turned the page carefully, eager to uncover more, when a small piece of parchment fell out from between the pages. It was a map, crude, yet detailed. The ink had smudged in places, but it was clear enough to see that it depicted the very cabin she was sitting in. Her heart skipped a beat. At first, she thought it was a map of the surrounding area, but as she studied it closer, she saw a small X marked at the back of the cabin, near the overgrown trees that had once lined the property. The map appeared to lead to something beneath the earth, beneath the house itself. Her curiosity flared. She had already found the hidden room, and now this map, was pointing to something more. Something deeper. The thought of continuing to dig into the earth, to uncover whatever lay beneath, was both thrilling and terrifying. But Sarah had come this far. She was already here, already invested in this strange, unexpected journey. If there was a hidden treasure, or a secret buried beneath this cabin, she was determined to find it. She carefully folded the map and tucked it into the back of her jacket, standing up from the floor. Her legs were stiff from crouching for so long, but the excitement pulsed through her veins, making her forget the aches in her body. She couldn't go back now. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the clearing. It would be dark soon, but Sarah didn't care. She knew what she had to do. She had to find what the map was pointing to. The very idea of it, something hidden, something ancient, set her pulse racing. The cabin creaked as she moved, the sounds of the structure groaning in protest. She walked slowly toward the back of the house, where the trees grew thick and wild. The map was clear, and she felt a strange certainty in her steps. She had no idea what she would find, whether it would be gold, history, or something else entirely, but the pull to uncover the truth was undeniable. As she reached the edge of the trees, she knelt down and began pulling at the earth. The ground was soft here, loose and almost inviting, as though the earth itself had been waiting for this moment. She dug deeper, her hands covered in dirt, sweat trickling down her forehead. It wasn't long before her fingers brushed against something hard, wood, or maybe stone. She paused, her breath catching in her throat. Whatever it was close. She could feel it. Sarah's hands trembled as she pushed away the last layer of dirt, revealing a large, weathered stone slab. Her breath hitched in her throat. This was it, the object the map had led her to. The earth had hidden it for so long, and now, here it was, right in front of her. The stone was covered in moss and roots, but the edges were sharp and defined. There was no question that this was a door, or at least part of one. She ran her fingers over the stone, feeling the grooves and carvings etched into its surface. The designs were intricate, far more detailed than anything she had ever seen. They looked like symbols, but they were unfamiliar. She didn't know whether they had any meaning, but something told her they were important. Her heart raced as she considered her next move. The stone was too heavy to lift on her own, but she couldn't leave it here. She had to know what was inside. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed a nearby rock and began to tap at the edge of the stone slab, hoping to break away some of the dirt and debris covering the seal. She worked methodically, every strike of the rock sending vibrations through her arms. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, it was hard to tell. The sun had set, and the woods around her were cloaked in shadows, but she couldn't stop. The need to uncover whatever lay behind the stone was overwhelming. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of work, a small crack appeared in the stone. She dug at it with her fingers, pulling away chunks of dirt and stone. With one final push, the slab shifted slightly, revealing a small gap underneath. A rush of excitement surged through her. She knew this was it. She pushed harder, her body straining against the weight of the stone. The gap widened, and as the stone finally shifted, a low groan echoed through the earth. Sarah crawled forward, pressing her face close to the gap. Inside, she could barely make out a glimmer of light, a soft, glowing warmth that seemed out of place in the cool, dark earth. She reached into the gap and, with a quick tug, pulled something out. It was a chest, small, wooden, and locked tight with an iron clasp. The chest's surface was weathered, its wood scratched and worn, but it felt solid, ancient. As her fingers traced the edges, she knew this chest had been hidden for a reason, kept away from prying eyes. She held it in her hands, her breath shallow with anticipation. What could be inside? Would this be the end of her search, or was there something even more surprising beneath it all? Sarah sat back on her heels, the chest resting in her lap. The weight of it was heavy, both physically and emotionally. She had unearthed something hidden for years, perhaps even centuries, and now, with the small chest in front of her, she was at a crossroads. What was inside? She could feel her heart racing, her breath quickening with anticipation. With trembling fingers, she ran her hand over the iron clasp, tracing the intricate engravings that had worn away with time. The chest was old. There was no doubt about that. But it was also surprisingly well preserved considering how long it had been buried under layers of dirt and time. She had to admit part of her feared what she might find. What if this discovery only brought more trouble, more mysteries she wasn't ready for? But that fear was overridden by curiosity, a deep, insatiable need to know. She needed to understand what lay inside this small chest. Whatever it was, it had been kept hidden for too long. As her fingers worked the latch, a faint click sounded. Her heart leaped, and she slowly lifted the clasp open. The lid creaked as it revealed the contents. Inside was not gold or jewels, as she had hoped or imagined. Instead, there were papers yellowed, brittle pages wrapped in a worn leather binder. At first, disappointment flashed across Sarah's face, but as she touched the leather, something within her stirred. This wasn't just old paper, it felt important. The binder seemed out of place in such a humble chest. Sarah's fingers brushed the edges of the binder, carefully pulling it out. It wasn't much to look at. Its leather cover was cracked, and the binding seemed fragile, but it held something in it that called to her. The pages inside were filled with symbols, just like the ones she had seen in the journal earlier. The same cryptic markings, the same language she couldn't understand, but there was something else. A key, an old, rusted iron key, was tucked between the pages. Sarah's eyes widened as she held it up. It was small, nothing extraordinary, but it felt heavy in her hand, like it carried the weight of everything she had just discovered. The key seemed to be part of the mystery, and Sarah knew, deep in her gut, that it was meant to unlock something far greater than this chest. Without thinking, she slipped the key into her pocket and closed the binder carefully. The chest was empty now, except for a handful of dust and the faint smell of earth. Sarah glanced back toward the hole she had dug, then back at the binder in her lap. What was this key for? What could it unlock? With a sigh, she stood, brushing the dirt off her hands. The forest around her had grown quiet, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the wind. She didn't know what came next, but she had a feeling the key was only the beginning of a much bigger puzzle. The key weighed heavily in Sarah's pocket as she made her way back to the cabin. Her mind was spinning with questions, but she pushed them aside for now. She had to focus on what was in front of her, what she had uncovered beneath the earth. The journal, the map, the chest, they were all leading her somewhere, but she wasn't sure where that was yet. As she approached the cabin, the last rays of sunlight were beginning to fade, casting long shadows across the dilapidated porch. The cabin felt more alive than it ever had before. She had unearthed something ancient, something important. But what did it all mean? She could feel the weight of the discovery pressing on her chest, the urgency to know more growing with each passing minute. Sarah entered the cabin, the creaky floorboards groaning under her weight as she walked inside. She set the binder and key down on the old table, her fingers still tingling from touching the ancient objects. The musty smell of the cabin was comforting in its own way, but now it felt different, charged with the energy of something unknown. She had to find what the key unlocked. But where? The cabin had no obvious locks, no doors that needed a key. Sarah paced back and forth, her eyes scanning the walls, the floor, anything that might give her a clue. She couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin held more than just a few secrets. It was tied to the map, to the journal, to everything she had discovered so far. Her gaze landed on the fireplace. It was stone, ancient-looking, and covered in soot. Something about it seemed out of place. Her eyes narrowed. What if the key wasn't for a door, but for something hidden within the cabin itself? Without hesitation, Sarah moved toward the fireplace. She examined it closely, running her fingers along the cracks in the stone. It was cold to the touch, but she felt around carefully, pressing her hands against the surface. Her fingers brushed against something an odd shape, hidden in the wall behind the hearth. She pressed harder, and to her surprise, a section of the stone wall shifted. It wasn't much, but it was enough to reveal a hidden compartment in the stone. Inside, she found a small metal box, covered in rust, and right beside it another locked compartment, this one too small for her hand to reach. She grabbed the metal box, her hands shaking as she twisted the rusted latch open. The box fell open with a soft clink, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Inside were small relics, pieces of jewelry, a few tarnished coins, and most strikingly, a faded portrait of a man, a woman, and a child. The faces were blurred by time, but the message was clear. This family, whoever they were, had once lived here. They were the ones who had hidden all of this. The key. It wasn't just for the cabin. It was for unlocking a truth about this place, about the family. Sarah had a sinking feeling that she was only scratching the surface of something much bigger. But one thing was for certain, she was about to uncover the past, and it was bound to change everything. The hidden metal box sat on the table in front of Sarah, its contents spilling out in a quiet array. She reached for the faded portrait, her fingers gently brushing the worn paper. The faces of the man, the woman, and the child were so faint, almost ghostly, but they were undeniably connected to this place. Who were they? What had happened to them? She sat down heavily in the chair, the weight of the discovery settling in. The journal, the map, the key. It was all beginning to make sense, yet there were still more questions than answers. Sarah had unearthed pieces of a puzzle, but the image they formed remained hidden, just out of reach. The small chest, now empty of its earlier contents, lay on the table beside the box. Her mind raced as she considered the significance of everything she had found so far. It was as though this house, this cabin, was a time capsule, holding memories of a family long forgotten. But why had they left? What had they hidden here? The portrait was the first true clue she had that tied the cabin's past to the present. She stared at the family in the photo, wondering if they had left something more behind. The faded faces looked so peaceful, so happy, yet Sarah could feel the weight of loss in the air around her. This wasn't just a forgotten home, it was a place of significance. A place that had held meaning for someone long before she came here. Her eyes drifted back to the metal box. She hadn't fully examined its contents yet. The coins were old, tarnished, and covered in a fine layer of dust. They could have been nothing more than mementos or relics of another time, but something about them felt more like they were connected to a story that needed to be told. Then, tucked beneath the coins, Sarah found another small piece of paper, this one yellowed with age. It wasn't a map or a journal entry, it was a letter. The ink was smudged, but she could make out some of the words. To the one who finds this, know that our journey is not over. Her heart raced. This was it. This was the link she had been searching for, the missing piece of the puzzle. The letter was addressed to someone who would find it long after the family had disappeared. Whoever they were, they had left this message for a reason. She unfolded the letter carefully, her hands shaking as she read the rest of it. The words were written in a hurried, almost desperate hand, But they were clear. We've hidden the truth beneath the house, where only the worthy can find it. It's a secret that must never be forgotten, a legacy that must continue. Take care of this place. It's more than a home, it's a promise. A promise to us and to the future. May you protect what we've left behind. The letter's meaning was clear. The family had left something precious, something irreplaceable, hidden beneath the cabin, a legacy that needed to be preserved. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the words again. Whatever it was important. More important than anything she had ever known. She stood up, feeling a sense of purpose welling inside her. The weight of the letter, of the responsibility, felt heavy, but it also gave her a sense of clarity. She had to find the rest of the story. She had to uncover what had been hidden here. The night had fully settled around the cabin, casting long shadows over the landscape. The air was cold, and Sarah could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on her as she stood in front of the fireplace. The hidden compartment in the stone wall had revealed the metal box, the coins, the portrait, and the letter. But there was still something she couldn't shake, something about the way the family had spoken of protecting their legacy. The words echoed in her mind. A promise to us and to the future. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted the logs in the fireplace, trying to think clearly. It was as though the cabin was alive with a secret, one that had been waiting to be uncovered. But Sarah knew there was more. She could feel it. The hidden chamber, the map, the journal, they were all connected. The key she had found earlier must fit into something, but what? She turned back to the fireplace, eyeing it one more time. There had to be another clue. The stone compartment had already given up part of its secret. But the key, the small iron key, still felt like it held the answer to something much bigger. Without thinking, she reached for the key in her pocket, the cold metal cool against her fingertips. She had tried it on every door in the cabin, but none of them had been a fit. But what if the key wasn't meant for a door? What if it was meant for something deeper, something hidden away? Her mind raced as she ran her fingers over the stone wall again. She pressed her palm against it, trying to discern any irregularities in the surface. And then, as if in response, a small section of the stone slid back. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to reveal a faint outline of another door, this one much smaller, tucked away behind the wall. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was it. She had found it. The door was hidden in plain sight, tucked beneath the surface of the fireplace itself. She inserted the key into the lock, feeling it click into place. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a narrow passageway that led deeper into the earth. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine as she stepped forward. The darkness ahead seemed to swallow the light, but she didn't hesitate. The promise made by the family was clear. Whatever lay beyond this door, it was meant for her to uncover, and she was ready to find it. Sarah stood frozen at the threshold of the narrow passageway. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of old earth filled her lungs. The stone door behind her had closed with a soft thud, cutting off the sound of the wind outside and the faint chirping of crickets in the distance. The only thing she could hear now was the soft echo of her own breathing. The passage ahead was dimly lit, the light from the cabin's fireplace barely making it past the narrow opening. She stepped forward cautiously, her boots scraping against the cold stone floor. The walls of the passage were rough-hewn, like the rest of the cabin, but there was a strange precision to the way the stones fit together. It didn't feel like the passage had been built in haste. It was intentional, carefully crafted. As Sarah walked deeper into the darkness, her fingers grazed the walls. The stone felt cold to the touch, but there was something comforting about it, as if the passage had been waiting for her to find it. Her pulse quickened, and she could feel the excitement building in her chest. She had known there was more to this place. She had known the family's secret wasn't finished. It had only just begun to reveal itself. The passage began to widen, and Sarah's eyes adjusted to the dim light. Ahead, the narrow corridor opened up into a small underground chamber. The room was just as old as the cabin above, but it felt different, more sacred, more intentional. The stone walls were lined with shelves, many of them filled with dusty old books, trinkets, and artifacts. But there was something else, something that immediately caught Sarah's attention. In the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal, and on top of it was a small, intricately carved box. It was made of wood, dark and weathered, but the carvings on its surface were still clear symbols and patterns that mirrored the ones she had seen in the journal. The box was sealed with a delicate clasp, and Sarah knew, deep down, that this was what she had been searching for. She stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat. Her fingers hovered over the box, the weight of the moment pressing in on her. This was it. The family had hidden this here, beneath the cabin, for a reason. It wasn't just a treasure, it was a part of their legacy. And now, she was the one meant to uncover it. With a final, steadying breath, Sarah reached for the box and lifted it from the pedestal. The moment her fingers touched it, she felt a jolt of energy almost like a pulse, as if the box had been waiting for her to find it. The clasp opened with a soft click, and Sarah slowly lifted the lid. Inside was a single piece of parchment, yellowed with age and carefully folded. But as she unfolded it, her heart skipped a beat. Written on the paper was a name, her name. The piece of parchment trembled in Sarah's hands. She stared at the name scrawled across the top of the page, her eyes widening in disbelief. It was her name, Sarah. How could this be? She had no family connection to this place, no ties to the past that could explain this strange coincidence. And yet, there it was, written clearly in faded ink. Her heart raced as she continued reading the message. The handwriting was old, but still legible. It read, "Sarah, if you are reading this, then you have found what we left behind. The legacy we built here was not meant to stay hidden forever. You are the one who will continue our work. The cabin is more than a home. It is a sanctuary. The key you found, the journal, the map, they were all meant for you. Do not be afraid of the task ahead. Embrace it. Protect this place, and you will understand its true purpose. The answers you seek lie within the walls you have uncovered, and the story will be yours to tell." Sarah's hands shook as she read the message over and over again. Her mind was reeling. Who were these people? Why had they left this message for her? She wasn't related to them, at least. She didn't think she was. There had to be some mistake. But then, the pieces began to fall into place. The journal, the map, the key, these were all things she had found by sheer chance, or so she thought. But now, reading these words, she realized that nothing had been by chance. This was all part of a larger plan, a story that had been waiting for her to uncover. The weight of the message hung heavy in the air. The family who had once lived here, who had built this place, had left behind more than just memories. They had left a responsibility. It was hers now, whether she was ready for it or not. The answers she sought were right in front of her, hidden in the very walls of this cabin. She stood up slowly, the parchment still clutched in her hands. The room felt colder now, as if the walls themselves were pressing in, urging her to act. Sarah knew there was no going back. The secrets of the cabin, of this hidden world beneath it, had been passed to her, and the legacy, whatever it was hers to protect. But as she looked around the underground chamber, another question lingered in her mind. What had this family done? And what was the true purpose of the cabin? Was it merely a home, or was it something much more? And most importantly, why was she chosen? Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the walls of the cabin were closing in around her. The message on the parchment was still fresh in her mind, and with it came an overwhelming sense of responsibility. "You are the one who will continue our work," the letter had said. The words echoed in her head, each repetition adding more weight to her chest. She stood in the underground chamber, the small wooden box in her hands, trying to process everything she had just learned. This wasn't just a random discovery. This was fate, or so it felt. But the question gnawed at her. Why her? She was just a woman with a baby on the way, broke and struggling to find her footing. She wasn't anyone special, so why had this family's legacy chosen her? Sarah's fingers ran over the old journal, its pages filled with strange symbols and cryptic messages. Every part of the puzzle she had uncovered seemed to pull her deeper into something she wasn't sure she was ready for. Her mind raced as she considered the consequences of continuing down this path. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the overwhelming sense of pressure. When she opened them again, she looked around the chamber. The stone walls, lined with shelves of forgotten items, now felt less like relics of the past, and more like guardians of the secret she had uncovered. The air was thick with the weight of history. Whatever had been hidden here had been meant for someone with the resolve to carry it forward. And somehow, that person was her. Sarah's fingers tightened around the parchment as she scanned the room once more. The strange symbols on the journal, the key, The map, each piece pointed to something more significant. She could feel the cabin's pulse beneath her feet, the thrum of life that had been dormant for so long. The family had left this legacy, but now it was her responsibility to understand it. What had they built here? What was the sanctuary they spoke of? She ran her hand over the stone pedestal, the one that had held the box she had just uncovered. There was something about this place that felt alive, an energy that made the room feel more like a living entity than just a long-forgotten space. Her pulse quickened as she stepped toward the pedestal, her mind racing with possibilities. This wasn't just about unearthing treasures or uncovering history, it was about fulfilling a promise. She had to know what this legacy meant. But to do that, she would have to dig deeper, both into the mysteries of the cabin and into herself. The chamber felt colder now, and Sarah shivered as she stood before the stone pedestal. She had never believed in fate, never thought she was destined for anything beyond the daily grind of survival. But everything about this place, this discovery, seemed to push against her understanding of the world. The answers you seek lie within the walls you have uncovered. She had already discovered so much: the box, the journal, the letter, but there was still one thing that eluded her. The true purpose of the cabin. What had this family been hiding? Was it just about preserving their legacy, or was there something more? Sarah felt a surge of determination. She couldn't back away from this. The family had left their secrets in her hands for a reason, and now it was up to her to uncover them. She looked around the chamber again, her eyes scanning the shelves filled with ancient books, trinkets, and oddments. There had to be something here that could explain it all. As she walked toward one of the shelves, she noticed something different about a small alcove in the wall. Unlike the other shelves, which were cluttered with dusty items, this one was neat and organized, as though it had been cared for. The items were all small, delicate antique keys, tiny carvings of animals, and odd symbols she recognized from the journal. In the center of the shelf, she saw a small, glass vial. It was filled with a strange, glowing liquid. Sarah couldn't help but reach for it, her fingers trembling as she held the vial in her hands. The liquid shimmered, almost as though it were alive, reacting to her touch. She stared at it, mesmerized. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. She pulled the vial from the shelf, examining it closely. There was a faint inscription on the glass, barely visible but enough to catch her eye. The words read, "This is the heart of the sanctuary. Guard it well." Her breath caught in her throat. The heart of the sanctuary? What did that mean? Was this vial some sort of key? Or was it something far more important? Her mind raced, but she couldn't make sense of it. The vial seemed to hold an answer she wasn't ready to understand, like it was a piece of a much larger puzzle. The chamber, once a place of mystery, now felt like a labyrinth, a maze of secrets and unanswered questions. Sarah knew that finding the truth about the legacy of this family would take everything she had. But as the vial glowed softly in her hands, she knew that, whatever lay ahead, she had already crossed a line. There was no turning back now. The sanctuary was waiting, and the key to its secrets was in her hands. Sarah stood in the underground chamber, her hands still clutching the vial. The strange liquid inside shimmered softly, casting an eerie glow against the stone walls. The weight of the discovery seemed to press on her chest, but she couldn't pull her eyes away from the vial. The inscription on it, "This is the heart of the sanctuary. Guard it well," kept repeating in her mind. What was the sanctuary? What did it mean for her to guard this vial? She didn't know. But what she did know was that she couldn't walk away from this. This was her responsibility now. The family who had lived in the cabin had left behind more than just memories, they had left behind a mission. And somehow, Sarah had become part of it. She felt a strange, almost spiritual connection to this place, to the hidden world beneath it. The legacy wasn't just about preserving the cabin or the secrets it held. It was about something larger, something more profound. She stepped toward the pedestal, still holding the vial. The glow from the vial seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, as if it was alive, waiting for something. What? She wasn't sure, but she was determined to find out. The walls of the chamber felt like they were closing in, not in an oppressive way, but in a way that made her feel connected to everything. To the family who had lived here before her, to the future she was meant to protect. She could feel the weight of their hopes, their dreams, their fears pressing down on her. She wasn't just uncovering a history, she was rewriting it. For the first time since she had discovered the cabin, Sarah felt sure of one thing. This wasn't just about her. It was about the future, about protecting something that had been hidden for so long. Whatever the sanctuary was, whatever this family had left behind, it was her duty to ensure that it didn't disappear again. The vial felt heavier now, and the warmth inside her grew. She turned toward the stone passageway, the narrow path leading out of the chamber. There was more to this place, more to uncover, and as the air grew colder around her, Sarah knew that she was only at the beginning. She was no longer just a woman struggling to make a life. She was part of something much larger, a guardian of the past, a protector of secrets, and the journey ahead, she realized, was one she had no choice but to follow. As Sarah made her way back through the narrow passage, the vial's glow seemed to grow brighter with each step she took. It was as if the chamber beneath the cabin had awakened something within her, a purpose she had never known she had. The air felt different now, charged with a strange energy, and the weight of the vial in her hands was no longer heavy with uncertainty. It felt like an answer, like she had been chosen for something far beyond what she could have ever imagined. The narrow corridor led her back to the main room of the cabin. The dim light of the fireplace flickered in the distance, casting long shadows against the walls. She had uncovered so much, yet she felt like she had barely scratched the surface. The family's legacy was more than just hidden treasure or forgotten history. It was a promise that now rested squarely on her shoulders. She placed the vial gently on the table, her hands still trembling from the intensity of her discovery. The soft glow from the vial illuminated the room, casting a warm light on the walls that had once seemed cold and forgotten. The room was different now, too. It wasn't just a crumbling relic of the past, it was alive with purpose. But the questions that had haunted Sarah from the very beginning still lingered. What was the sanctuary? What had the family built here? And most pressing of all, why had they left all of this to her? The key, the journal, the map, the Brock letter, and now the vial. Each piece of the puzzle had been placed in her hands with a single directive: guard it well. As Sarah reached for the journal once more, her fingers brushed over the weathered pages. She flipped through the book, scanning for any more clues. There had to be more answers hidden in these pages, more information that would help her understand the family's purpose. And there it was. One last entry, tucked between the pages, written in the same cryptic symbols she had seen earlier. But this time, the words seemed to make sense. It was a map of the sanctuary, of where it was hidden. The family had built it beneath the very earth Sarah had just uncovered. It wasn't just a physical place. It was a sanctuary of knowledge, of preservation. And it was waiting for her to unlock its final secret. Her heart raced as she studied the map, her eyes tracing the lines and symbols. This was it, the key to everything. And Sarah knew that this final discovery would be the hardest of all. But she was ready. She had to be. The legacy she had uncovered was hers to protect. And whatever lay ahead, she would face it head on. Sarah stood in the center of the cabin, the weight of everything she had uncovered pressing heavily on her shoulders. The vial, the journal, the letter, everything had led her here, to this moment. She had learned about the sanctuary beneath the cabin, but now, it was time to uncover its true purpose. The map in her hands pointed to a place deep beneath the earth, far beyond the confines of the small underground chamber. There was something more, something she had to find. The family who had once lived here had left behind a legacy, a promise. They had hidden the sanctuary, sealed it away, with the hopes that only the worthy would find it. Sarah had no idea if she was worthy, but she was determined to finish what they had started. She examined the map again. It wasn't just a map of the cabin or the underground chambers, it was a guide to the heart of the sanctuary, the final secret. And the more she looked at it, the clearer the path became. There was a spot marked with a large X, far deeper beneath the cabin than she had ever imagined. The symbol was etched with the same cryptic markings she had seen in the journal, the same symbols that had become her guide. Taking a deep breath, Sarah gathered the journal, the vial, and the map. The time had come. There was no turning back now. She had to find the sanctuary's heart. The family had left her the key, both literal and metaphorical, and she was ready to unlock it. The path was treacherous, the descent deeper than anything she had faced. But with each step, Sarah felt a growing certainty. This was her journey now. The cabin had become more than just a building, it had become a living part of her story, and the legacy of the family, who had once called it home, was intertwined with her own future. After what seemed like hours of descending through narrow passageways, Sarah finally reached the place marked on the map. The ground beneath her feet was soft, almost spongy, and the air felt cooler. The walls around her were lined with stone, and in the center of the space was a large stone altar, covered in moss and ancient carvings. Sarah approached the altar, her heart pounding. She could feel the energy in the air, a hum of power, as if the very earth was alive with secrets. The altar had once been the focal point of the sanctuary, a place where the family had stored their most valuable treasures, knowledge, artifacts, and wisdom. But now, it was waiting for her. She placed the vial on the altar, and as she did, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The stone walls shifted, and the earth trembled beneath her. The altar began to glow, a soft, golden light emanating from it. The sanctuary was awakening, responding to her presence. It was then that Sarah realized the truth. The sanctuary wasn't just a physical space, it was a place of transformation, a place where knowledge and power could be passed on to those who were ready to carry it forward. And Sarah, with all the strength she had found in this place, was ready. The golden light from the altar grew brighter, engulfing Sarah in its warmth. The chamber seemed to come alive around her, the stones vibrating with energy as the sanctuary opened its secrets. The vial she had placed on the altar began to glow even more intensely, and Sarah could feel the weight of its power. It was as though the earth itself was speaking to her, guiding her to the next step in her journey. The carvings on the altar began to shift, the ancient symbols twisting and rearranging themselves into new patterns. Sarah watched in awe, her heart racing as the walls of the sanctuary seemed to breathe with life. The family who had once hidden their secrets here had left her not just with the responsibility of preserving their legacy but with the ability to unlock the very heart of the sanctuary. The moment felt timeless, like the world outside had ceased to exist. Sarah reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and touched the altar. As her fingers made contact with the stone, a wave of knowledge and understanding flooded her mind. She saw flashes of the family's past, their struggles, their triumphs, and their hopes for the future. She saw their mission, their purpose, to preserve the knowledge and wisdom they had gathered, to protect it from the world that might destroy it. The sanctuary wasn't just a place, it was a living memory, a repository of everything the family had worked to protect. And now, it was her turn to carry that legacy forward. As the light from the altar dimmed, Sarah felt a calm settle over her. The sanctuary had revealed its truth to her, and with it, her purpose was clear. She wasn't just a guardian of the past. She was the keeper of the future, the one chosen to ensure that the family's knowledge would never be forgotten. The ground beneath her shifted slightly, and a hidden door in the wall opened. Beyond it lay a staircase that ascended toward the surface the way out. But this time, Sarah knew the world above would be different. The weight of her discovery would change her forever. She wasn't just a woman with a baby on the way anymore, she was the protector of a legacy, the keeper of a sanctuary that had waited for centuries to be found. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward, leaving the sanctuary behind. As she climbed the stairs, she felt the cool air of the outside world. The sun had begun to rise, casting a soft golden light over the cabin and the clearing. The world had changed, but so had she. She was no longer lost, no longer struggling to survive. She had found her purpose. The cabin, the sanctuary, the family, they had all led her to this moment. And as Sarah stepped into the light of a new day, she knew that this was only the beginning.